Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to go over the basic footwork and some simple drills that you can do at home that will help with your swordsmanship and specifically help you in terms of preparing for a Buhurt fight. So here we are going over some basic footwork, just simple steps in different directions. The important aspect of this is that you raise both feet. With each step, you're not sliding your feet and you're not crossing your feet. You can go in any direction, and we are just taking nice, simple steps, being very conscious of our hips being low and dropped, our knees being bent. And then here we are doing an advanced step. It is basically a switch foot and then a lunge, and we're going back to our simple steps. What I like to do is basically warm up, and there's a retreating step, so we're bringing our feet together without passing them before we take the step, just like that. And some quick steps here, but like I was saying, what I like to do is basically drill different points of footwork for a few minutes, really making sure that we're bending our knees and dropping our hips and being very conscious of each step, because it does help drill it into our minds as well as gets us a little warm. So nothing too crazy, but it'll definitely help you stay warm. And I'm just going to let the rest of these footwork drills play out without much commentary here. Again, I can go into some footwork in the future, make a more detailed video on it. This was just kind of a recording I had of some drills I did. I ended up removing all the speaking parts of this video because the little car that my son had was very loud, so I ended up having to remove it, and it's been a while since this has been filmed, so we're just gonna kind of highlight the key points, and you guys can just enjoy the training. All right, now that we finished up the footwork, I'm just going to go ahead and roll out my wrists a bit. This is a good conditioning and just like a good stretch as well for swordsmanship and anything that's going to be like kind of wrist intensive. So basically you're just going to rotate your sword in a supinated and pronated grips, basically palm up, palm down. And then when we switch hands, I'm going to hold the sword where my hand would normally be. But first we're going to roll out the wrist. So people have criticized me in the past for doing these flourishes. This actually helps roll out your wrist and kind of condition your wrist flexibility. So even though they aren't necessary for swordsmanship in terms of skill to learn, they are helpful to kind of get those wrists nice and loose, nice and stretched, and strengthen those joint muscles. And then here we're going to switch sides, and like I said, I like to hold the sword with my left hand in the position that it would normally be held when I'm swinging it, because that's how it's going to feel typically, and it also increases the weight of the sword. Both hands do this, but personally I just like it. It's a old Iaido kendo thing that I learned, and I just kind of kept it. We're going to move straight into this good dynamic shoulder stretch here. This sword is a little bit too short for my shoulder flexibility, but my new sword, if you guys have seen the previous videos, is a good length in order to actually execute on this. Actually, the sword that I have between these two swords, which I don't think you guys have seen, funnily enough, is also a decent length to do this. It's probably like the smallest sword I have that I can actually achieve this. But basically what you're trying to do is bring both arms behind your back like that, and then bring them all the way down. But this sword that I have is just a little too short to execute on that. Then we're going to go into a deep lunge, bring the sword to the side and out. This just sort of helps as a counterbalance and sort of a dynamic flexibility movement. Then we're going to pivot to our back foot. And right here, you can't see it because I didn't get it on camera. I wasn't really thinking of the angle when I did this, but basically I'm trying to touch my toe on this back foot. You'll see it when I do the reverse side, but basically I was just trying to touch my toe. And then we're going to go ahead and touch our toes, shoulder width apart, and then I'm going to start rotating at the hips like a pendulum here in a minute. So you'll see that. Yep. And that is just, again, nice loosen up stretch. Get you nice and limber for the dynamic movements that we're going to do as we swing the sword. Now we're going to get into the first sword conditioning drill. Right here I'm just demonstrating that the sword should be perpendicular to the ground above your head and not perpendicular to your body. And then we're going to do nice slow swings here. I believe I do about 50 swings. Just make sure you bring the sword all the way up perpendicular to the ground and then bring it to about your belly button. You don't really want to like slash the sword too far down. And nice and slow and controlled, and you can kind of speed it up, and I believe I do speed it up here at some point to kind of make it more difficult on yourself. And just keep your legs nice, relaxed, shoulder width apart, and basically just swing until you don't want to swing anymore, and then swing a few more times after that. Next up, we're going to do a very similar activity, except we're going to add a squat into the movement. And the important thing here is that, again, we're not letting the sword fall. Once the sword hits perpendicular with the ground in front of us, we're going to kind of just keep it at that point as we squat. And the deeper the squat, the better. Typically, I'll do around 10 to 20 of these, so just do however many you feel like until you start to feel a good burn on your legs. All right, next up, I'm going to do a little flow drill. I'm not too focused on my footwork here, but I'm basically doing the descending strikes to iron butterfly and then kind of opening up into a couple other just sword swings that kind of feel like they flow through with that. Don't be afraid to kind of play around with your sword and try to figure out how different actions chain into each other. All right, and here I'm just doing a couple more flow drills, just some descending strikes. Again, I'm just kind of playing around with the sword, feeling it out, trying to think about different actions and how they flow into each other. I'm also considering how actions might affect my sword's mobility as I'm connecting with someone's body, because it's a very different game when your sword kind of gets caught up in somebody. And that's kind of why I slow down and I think about the action here thinking about how I can actually execute on some of these. A lot of the time, these follow-through actions are actually designed to kind of beat the opponent's blade and then move into an action where you can parry. And then here I'm doubling up on some strikes. Double strikes are good in fencing because you can, again, knock the opponent's blade away and then immediately attack that angle. And in Buhurt, these strikes can be very beneficial for the same reason, but also because a lot of the time you're throwing caution to the wind and you're kind of just attacking your opponent. And so you need to find angles that they can't predict. And more oftentimes than not, doubling up on an angle at least once or twice during the fight can really throw them off. And now we're back to our next conditioning exercise. We're going to be throwing a snap cut forward ahead of us. Right now we're doing it on our dominant side, and then eventually we will switch to our non-dominant side. These actions are the bread and butter of longsword, pretty much. These are very important. It's important to not fully commit to the strike and basically do these snaps, because then your blade will return faster, versus if you were to try to cut through your opponent. This is true in both fencing and Buhurt. There are reasons and purposes to do a full cut, but a lot of the time these snap cuts are going to be the most efficient in order to sort of defend yourself and get through to your opponent, hit them quickly. And in Buhurt, it's especially important because we want to hit them quickly, consecutively. So yeah, and basically the way this action works is I'm pushing both of my arms forward, and then as I do, I pull back on my backhand a little bit, so my non-dominant hand's going to pull back a little bit to create that cutting action. And then I'm going to firmly stop the sword right there in the center. I'm kind of aiming for my opponent's head or like their clavicle areas where you want to imagine that you're cutting to. And then we retreat our hands back and we cut again. And right now you can see that my feet are pivoted toward the side that my sword hand is on. So whichever side your sword is on your head, the back foot is going to be on that same side. And we're kind of pivoting our heel a little bit here, like you would if you were going to throw a jab. All right, the next drill we're going to get into is throwing our Zwerkhaus. These are essentially cross cuts thrown over the head. These are very valuable strikes for Buhurt, as they are extremely quick. The issue with them is they are uniquely fatiguing in armor. So you have to really condition this. This is why the conditioning is so important now, is because the stronger you get to be able to hold the sword out of armor, the better you're going to be in armor. And I would recommend, if you have armor, to practice a lot of these actions in armor at least once a week to kind of build that conditioning even further. In case you're wanting to follow along as well, I'm doing about 100 of these strikes here. Alright, and next up is a drill where we're going to do an advancing snap cut into a parry on the opposite side, and then we're going to basically just continue that cut and step forward, and I believe we go backward as well once we get, yep. So advancing and retreating snap cuts, just find a nice space to do these. Again, it's important to throw the cut forward, and then you're going to bring your hands to your side, and it is important that your knuckles are always facing outward, as this allows you to basically ensure that your arms are covered by the blade instead of having your elbow exposed on either side. I definitely think the next time I do a sword training video, I'm going to go over a lot of these sort of basic details in greater detail and in depth for you guys, because I understand that sometimes I say things that to someone who's never trained with a sword or is looking as this video as sort of a resource on how to start training. I should probably make some basic guides so that way we can get people started. So I might end up trying to make a series on that, just like the very basics of long swordsmanship, and see if that has any sort of success. Maybe like short 10-minute videos on just each basic action. Alright, here's just a series of clips of me just kind of messing around with different flows and cutting angles and things. I was explaining a lot in these clips, but again, I had to mute a lot of it due to the background noises and things, so just go ahead and observe the movements and enjoy the flow. And if you'd like to try to replicate them, go for it. But like I said, I'll try to make a video series going further into depth on different actions and basics and things like that and strategies. So I think that'll be a more effective use of it. And that's pretty much it. Just kind of ended this with some hanging parry drills. Just kind of did that, and then I yapped at the camera for a while, but I'm going to go ahead and cut all that out. Kind of talked about half swording and things like that in the context of pro fighting, which I should definitely go into at some point. That could be a fun video. But nonetheless, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. This was sort of a little bit less scripted training session that I had. And I just wanted to share it with you guys. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.